I would like to speak to you now about helping geeks to speak, because it's come to my attention that sadly a lot of geeks make suboptimal presentations, and I want to help improve that situation. Now, I would point out that this is not aimed at people in this room, because when you're doing a geek to geek presentation, that's kind of a different kettle of fish. This is more about what happens when you're out in the real world. But I want to start by asking you a quick question, and I'd like to ask you this. Of all the people that you've come across in your career, just by show of hands, have you ever come across someone that wasn't achieving the level of success that their technical skills and abilities said they should? Have you ever met somebody like that? Clever people, but just not achieving that level of success. Let me change one word in that question, make it a little bit closer to home, a little bit personal. I'm not asking for a show of hands this time. This is just for think to yourself. I'm only going to change one letter, actually, in the question. Have you ever been someone who wasn't achieving the level of success that your technical skills and abilities said you should? It's a bit of a deep question, isn't it? Something to think about. So you've probably heard of FOMO, the fear of missing out. What I have is a very fierce case of FOGMO. It's the fear of geeks missing out. I simply can't stand the thought of really clever, well-meaning technical people missing out on that new promotion or that new job in a new company, maybe missing out on attracting people into their open source community, possibly missing out on making the sale, or even missing out on raising funding for their company simply because they're not communicating as well as they could, or indeed as well as they should. And so what I've got for you today is a little bit of an agenda just for our short time together. I want to talk about the importance of being able to make your case, of speaking in public. You're seeing examples of it here, but I'm talking about when we get out into the outside world, speaking to less technical audiences. I want to understand why sometimes nerds aren't heard, why their presentations sometimes go amiss, and then I've got a little framework for you. So just in case you're sitting here and thinking, actually, I don't want to speak in public, it's not something I want to do. Well, you can write these down anyway and share them with your friend that does want to speak in public, because they will be useful for those people. But before we do that, I was very heartened to see that we've got quite a lot of first-timers, because I've done this test before on a few occasions. So it's nice to see some first-timers in the audience. So I wanted to do the geometric test that I do sometimes do. So all you have to do is very simple. You just have to pick a shape. Has everybody got a shape in mind? Don't tell me what it is, you just have to pick it. Okay, that's good. All right, so let's just see, who are the triangle people? Just put your hands nice and high in the air. Have a good look round at the triangle people. Have a good look round. Nothing wrong with being a triangle, because these are the ambitious and directed people. It's the shape that says it, isn't it? These people know where they're going. They've probably got a bit of a plan to get there. Who are the squares? Nothing wrong with being a square. Keep the hands up and have a quick look at the squares, because they are the detailed conscious people. They like to dot the I's and cross the T's. If they're doing a colouring book, they'd colour right up to the edges, not just in the middle. These are the detailed conscious people. What about the circles? Quite a high proportion of circles. Have a quick look round at the circles, because the circles are the people. They're the people that, they're engineers, but they can think about other people as well. And if there's a group of engineers sitting down and one comes along and there's not enough chairs, the circles are the people that go and fetch another chair for that person to sit down. And what about the wiggly lines? How many wiggly lines? A good proportion. Have a good look round at the wiggly lines. Keep your hands up, because this has actually got a number of subcategories. First, let me tell you, you have an unhealthy obsession with something. Just keep your hands up. It could be Taylor Swift, could be Tom Cruise, or more likely here, it's probably VoIP and RTC solutions of one sort or another. And incidentally, just in case you're wondering, I've not actually tested this out on Tony, but I can tell you that Mark Spencer, the initial creator of Asterisk, was a wiggly line, or is a wiggly line. Anyway, the presentation applies to all groups of people. Just a little bit of background about me. I was been involved in open source communications for quite some time. First Astricon was, I think, 2006 in Dallas, but also I've been privileged to work with the guys at SignalWire as well. In my career at Astricon, and even prior to that, I've given a lot of presentations, I've seen a lot of presentations, and I've also chosen a lot of presentations, because I would have been on the panel at Astricon choosing the presentations that were going to make the grade. And in the geek universe, it's no problem knowing your stuff. In fact, it's very, very important to know your stuff because it's the tech that matters. Our technical knowledge is the key currency. But we like to get right into the details with each other, and that's great. However, it can be an issue because in geek-to-geek presentations like this, it's no problem. But when you get out into the wider world, you find that knowing your stuff is not enough. You've got to be able to communicate the right part of your stuff, the relevant part of your stuff, at the right technical level, and to talk to your audience with confidence and with clarity and with true engagement. So whether it's an interview panel and the hiring manager is not particularly technical, maybe you're looking to make a sale and the CFO of the company is in there at the presentation you're making and they're not particularly technical, or even if you're trying to attract funding or get people involved in your open source community, the chances are that you will make presentations at some stage to less technical people. And that's where we need this kind of interface. Now, as it happens, of all the presentations that there are out there in the real world, and there are millions of them every day, if you look at Google and try and find out how many presentations happen every day, just in the realm of PowerPoint, which is just one sort of system for visual aids, it was 30 million plus presentations every day, but I'm sure there's lots more. In the world of presentations, obviously, anybody that's into statistics would know that most presentations are going to be around average, aren't they? You know, that's just, you know, the laws of mathematics and statistics. Right down at the bottom, tending towards 0, I've got BCP. And BCP stands for buttock-clenchingly poor presentations. If you've ever seen somebody leave a presentation like this, you may have assumed that they needed the bathroom, but the likelihood is they've sat through a presentation that was so poor that their buttocks clenched and now they're having trouble walking. So that's at the lower end of the market. At the upper end, we've got SOG, standing ovation great. That's when you see a presentation. It's that good that whatever the action is at the end, whether it's buy something or implement something, you can't wait to do it because it was that good. But here's the sad part. The sad part is that geeks are disproportionately represented at that lower end of the market. They are sadly responsible for a lot of the presentations that tend towards, they're not always buttock-clenchingly poor, but they're tending towards that end of the market. And so the problem is that, as I said, the decision makers are often less technical people. And so knowing your stuff is not enough. As I said, you need to find the right part of your stuff and communicate it at the right level. And I don't want geeks to miss out in any way. I don't want them to miss out on promotions, on new jobs. I want money to flow towards geeks. And of course, for open source projects and for your own company and your own position in that company, it's good to be able to communicate well. So what are our common issues? Well, of course, a lot of people say, well, I just don't want to speak in public. I'm frightened. I've got a fear of speaking in public. And I would submit to you that actually, very often, that's not really the case. If you scratched below the surface of it, it would be more about feeling ill-prepared to be in front of a group of people. Or maybe feeling that you've got to be somebody other than who you are because you've seen a presenter and they were really funny or they were really out there and you just feel that you can't be that. Well, here's the good news. The best presentations you'll ever make are when you're being yourself. Just be true to yourself, whatever that is. So if that's deadpan instead of funny, if that's serious, then there's no problem there. Often geeks get a bit too technical. They come out and dump all of their knowledge. That's another problem. And a lot of the time, frankly, geeks don't work to make a connection with their audience. And that's very important. I'm going to come towards that near the end of the presentation. So sometimes a lack of self-awareness could be a problem. So geeks tends to sabotage their own presentations by just not thinking of some of the most important things. So the purpose of the rest of this presentation is to bridge that gap from knowing your stuff, which is frankly not enough, and to make the leap to being able to communicate with enthusiasm and with confidence and to truly engage with your audiences, whoever that might be. And I've got some hints and tips right near the end to help you do that. So I've got these 7 power presenting protocols that I've boiled down, making great presentations into, especially for geeks. So if you like following the syntax of a programming language or the rules of electronic design, these are like the 7 these are the 7 power presenting protocols that geeks can use to make a great presentation. They're easy for technical people to digest and therefore to implement. It's a framework as opposed to a formula. Nobody's forcing you into doing things in a certain way. It's a framework. So do take note of these, and they allow you to be individually true to yourself, to be authentic, which is the key. Because when you're being yourself, that's when you're making your best presentations. So let's just run through these. They are the purpose. Every presentation, in theory, has a purpose. But let's be frank. Have you ever sat through a presentation and wondered, what is the purpose of this presentation? Why am I here? Because the purpose of presentations, frankly, are not always immediately clear, especially to the audience. So if you are going to make a presentation, make sure that you've got a crystal clear purpose, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Then there's the plan. We all know that as people, we have certain attention spans. They start here, they finish here, and we should be able to take advantage of that to fit the key information in the most important part of people's attention span. And when people's attention naturally wanes, as it does through a presentation, we should have tools and techniques to raise the level of people's attention and to file things away in their memory. I call it the key to recall. So we need to plan for that. We need to understand that everybody has preferences. Now, that silly exercise at the beginning with the shapes, that showed that we're all different, didn't it? Right? It showed that we're all a little bit different. We fit into groups. Some people are wiggly lines, some are circles. But the truth of the matter is we all have preferences of various different types. And in particular, when you're making a presentation, it's important to understand people's learning styles and the way they take in information, and not to fall into the trap of delivering a presentation in the way that you like to receive it, because your audience isn't you. They might have a different style. That's preferences. Then we got practice. Very important to practice a presentation. Everybody would beta trial their software, I would like to think, or prototype their electronic circuits. And so why wouldn't we beta trial our presentation? Then there's the participation protocol. That's all about getting people involved. Then we perform, then we get out in front of the stage. Notice that the first 5 protocols are before you ever get in front of people, because it's all in the preparation. A good talk takes a lot of preparing for. And if a talk's worth doing, it's actually worth doing badly until you can do it well. That's what the practice protocol is all about. And then the last one is post-event. What do you do after you've made the presentation? Because that's, frankly, very important as well. I really hate kind of drive-by presentations where people show up, do a presentation, rattle off, and you never see them again. It's important to actually have some kind of life cycle of a presentation. Okay, so we can stand out by not only knowing your stuff, but being able to communicate with people as well. Engagement really is the key with people, because even engineers and software engineers are people, and they like to interface with people. And here's the thing. You don't have to be a mile in front to win a race. In order to stand out when you make a presentation, it's surprisingly small amount of preparation that you need to do that, because frankly, not everybody takes the steps. And so if you're the person that does take an interest and make some differences, you will stand out in a presentation. Okay, now, these 7 protocols that I've just shown you, they can be used to build a presentation from scratch. So if you've never made a presentation before, if you follow those protocols, you can build a powerful presentation. But if you already do presentations, and maybe you're pretty happy with them, maybe you do presentations and you think, actually, my presentations are pretty good. Well, you can use those 7 protocols as 7 lenses to look at your presentation and say, yeah, is the purpose clearly identified? Have I planned my presentation to make maximum impact on people's memories and their attention spans, and so on? So if you've already got a good one, we can use it to move it from, we can use the protocols to move from good towards standing ovation great as well. So let's just run through this in the time that we've got left together before lunch. And the first one is the purpose protocol. So that's where you sit down and you think about why you're doing this presentation. Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands here, but I just happen to know from experience that a lot of time when geeks are asked to make a presentation, they tend to think about their slides. They don't tend to think about the presentation. They think, yeah, well, I've got a deck of slides that Fred gave me from down the road or that somebody else handed me. I can probably modify those. I can shuffle them about. I'll delete that one. I'll add that one in. And as we'd say in England, Bob's your uncle or Fanny's your aunt. It's going to be all right. I've got the slides. But a real presentation takes some thinking about. So what you need to do first is just think about the presentation and about its purpose. Is it to implement a new work process? Is it to entertain your audience during their lunchtime and teach them a little bit about some new product? What is the genuine purpose of this presentation? And it actually happens at least 2 levels, if not 3. Let me just give you the 2 obvious ones. There's the actual presentation itself. What do you want to achieve during that presentation? But then there's the wider, I call it the macro level objectives or the business level objectives. If you get deep into learning theory, in the Kirkpatrick model of training needs evaluation, they talk about behavioral change. So let me give you an example. A presentation could be talking about the top 5 features of a new product, but the business level objective may be to reduce the number of tech support calls that we get about a given product. So you've got those 2 levels. So that's when we think about the purpose. And what we do in order to get the purpose out there is we write it down, and this doesn't have to be a long and wordy document. This could be 2 sentences on an email. But we note down the purpose, and what we do is we circulate it from the person that's going to give the presentation to the person that asked you to do the presentation. That's the sponsor. And even the audience. How about that? What about talking to your audience before you ever meet them? Now, I realise it's not always possible. It might be that you're coming to a conference like this and you don't know who's going to be there. In which case, you could talk to the conference organisers and ask them about the likelihood makeup of the audience. But in a sales situation, often you're going to see a few people and you know who they are. So why wouldn't you get in touch with them ahead of time and say, this is what I'm thinking to cover? Is that going to be right? And what you do is you just iteratively go round until everybody's happy, the 3 parties, the person giving the talk, the sponsor, as I call them, and the audience. And once they're all happy, then you know that there's going to be a good overlap. If you were using Venn diagrams, there'll be a really nice overlap between what you're going to give and what your audience needs to receive. So that's the purpose protocol. Then there's the planning protocol. And of course, in any presentation of any length, there is a beginning and an end. There has to be, doesn't there? It's kind of the law. And it turns out that people's attention is peaked at the beginning of a presentation and at the end. Now, if you wanted to go and buy some advertising on your local TV station, you would find that the first ad in an ad break and the last ad in an ad break cost more, because it's recognised that people's attention is higher at the beginning and at the end. And so we need to peak people's, or use the peak of people's attention in order to give a great presentation and lock the key information into their presentation at what I call the prime time. And you can see I've got a little acronym of proof there, because in my world, your audience needs proof. The P and the R are primacy and recency, the beginning and the ending. But then the OOF, don't have time to go into it, is overemphasis, outstanding things, and familiarity. In other words, these are tools that we can use to accentuate people's attention during a presentation. So that's planning. And what we need to do is have a little bit of a map of a presentation. Now, I would suggest to you that whenever you're called on to do a presentation, no matter how long the slot you've given, somebody sometime might say, I'm going to give you all morning. Now, you wouldn't want to do like a 2 or 3 hour presentation. I would say you want to aim for like 40-minute chunks and have little breaks between them. And actually, thinking about that beginning and ending, if you do break it up into chunks, you actually buy yourself an extra ending and an extra beginning, don't you? So you get even more attention when you break presentations up into chunks. But there's certain tools and techniques you can use to make sure people really are paying attention. Then we got preferences. And the preferences protocol is simply about understanding the way different people learn. Let me just ask a quick question here. And I'm just remembering, I brought some English chocolates to encourage participation. And they're just sat down there. I've not given any away. I'm not going to claim to be able to throw them right near the back of the room because it's a long way, but I'll have a go. So imagine this. You've got a brand new device. Let's call it a coffee machine. You know, it could have been a digital video recorder. It could have been anything, but we'll go for a coffee machine. You've got a brand new coffee machine. What's the first thing that you personally are going to do to get to know it I'm going to give you a couple of options, or 3 options. Are you going to rip it out of the box, disregard the instruction manual, plug it in, and just get going with it and see what it can do? Well, let's have a show of hands for that one. How many people are going to do that? Okay, keep your hands up. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, that's action orientation, isn't it? How many people are actually going to pull the manual out, take the manual out of its little envelope, sit back in their comfortable chair and read it all? Okay, so less people, and I'd expect that in an audience like this. I'm going to try and throw some chocolates in your direction, Fred. Yeah, sorry, Zoa. Didn't mean to hurt people. By the way, if you don't get an English chocolate and you'd like one, I'll leave them at the front near the end of the presentation so you can come and taste some of these. Okay, now, how many people, and this is going to be an interesting one, how many people are actually going to sit down in their comfortable chair without the manual, without the coffee machine, and just think about previous coffee machines that they've owned and how well things went with them? Not many people. Oh, Abby might. Thank you, Abby, for your participation there. Now, sweeping generalization, but if you happen to be making a presentation to a group of HR generalists, they may well be the kind of people that just want to sit back and think about things before they take that input. So the thing with this is just to remember that all 3 of these things need to happen. So let's say Fred reads his manual. He then uses the coffee machine, but gets to the point where he can do everything apart from one thing that he really wanted it to do. What he's going to do is then come back round and read that bit of the manual again, that particular page, and go round in that circle. So for learning to happen, all 3 of these things happen, but different people like to start at different places. Let's imagine you're an action-orientated person. Let's imagine you're one of the people that said, yeah, I rip this thing out and just get straight on with it. And imagine you were going to do a presentation to a group of people to show them some new software. You'd probably think, yeah, I'm going to put the mouse in their hands and I'm going to get them going with it. But maybe, just maybe, your audience is the kind of person that or the kind of people that like to read the manual first. So that's what this protocol is all about, is preferences. Then there's practice. Now, when I say practice, here's what I don't mean. Sitting an hour before your presentation, or in your hotel room the night before, or on an aeroplane, and going through your slides, going click, 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 going, yeah, when that slide comes up, I must remember to say that. And when this slide comes up, I'll probably talk about this. Now, that's better than nothing, but only marginally. You really need to get out there and practice out loud. Because when you practice out loud, a number of things happen. In fact, let's make this an audience participation part. What advantages do you get from practicing a presentation out loud, really doing it to people? Yes, sir. You get the timing. That's very important, isn't it? Especially in a multi-speaker conference like this. You need to be on time with your session. Let me throw you a couple of things. Yeah, timing. What other advantages? Yes, right at the back there. You get feedback from if you're delivering it to a real audience. So if you can find a real sympathetic audience, you can get some feedback. We had another one around here. Yes, sir. Brilliant. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, words and phrases that sound great in your head and sound perfect. When you speak them out loud, you might find that you stumble over them or they're a little bit clunky. That could happen. And so when you practice out loud, you might get feedback from friendly people that you're talking to. By the way, if you can't find an audience, everybody's got a cell phone, it's got a voice recorder on it, practice into that. Or do a video recording. The more practice you can do, the better. And by the way, given what I said about the beginning and the ending of a presentation being more important, which parts do you think you should practice more? Exactly. I'm not giving any chocolates for that. The beginning and the ending of the presentation are the most important points for you to practice. Practice them more than the whole thing, but still practice the whole thing. Here's a quick picture of my son. I use this as an example because my son's a guitar player. In fact, in 2016, he jammed with Tony at ClueCon. He came out here. But when he first started, he was a little bit self-conscious. He found it a little bit difficult to be in front of people. But can you see towards the end, he kind of gained some confidence there. And he's now a gigging musician. He played South by Southwest Festival in Austin earlier this year. And so the key here is the more you do it, the better you get. And so if you are somebody that would like to make more presentations, look for examples. Look for places to give presentations, even when nobody asks you to. So if you spot a problem at work, as engineers often do, Then do a little lunch and learn, do a little presentation, an unsolicited presentation to help people out. So that was practice. Then there's participation. I'm going to jump through this because it's very important to involve people. If you involve people, they'll be more committed to the outcome. Here are some means and modes. I'll just leave that in case you want to take a picture. Those are different ways that you can involve people in your presentation. And the more you involve them, the more committed they're going to be to the outcomes. Then we got performance. That's actually when you get out in front of people. And as you know, attitudes are infectious. You know, if you come out and do a presentation and you're apathetic as the presenter, then that's going to transmit to the audience. So never be apathetic. You need to be lively and engaging. This was from a talk I did in Germany to the Lean Dus Collective in Dusseldorf. They have a meeting every month hosted by the wonderful people at Sipgate, and we had a good time with them. So you need to engage people and get them excited for your performance. So be true to yourself, use your own characteristics. Sometimes maybe you're a quieter person, you're going to need a microphone. Other people with louder voices might not need a microphone, depending on the kind of venue. Okay, and then there's post-event. Nobody likes a drive-by shooting. I don't like drive-by presentations. So in order to avoid drive-by presentations, if you work through my power presenting protocols, what you're going to find is by having that agreement in place, not only did you get your talk right in the first place, but by agreeing the outcomes, you've then got something to go back to, even if, as I said, it's just a couple of lines on an email, to go back to after the presentation and say, well, did we achieve the things that we set out to achieve? Did we achieve, do people now know the top 5 things about this new product? Are we getting less technical support calls about this new product? That kind of thing. Very important indeed. Okay, so have you ever seen a picture a bit like this? I'm coming to an end now. Okay, have you ever seen a picture a bit like that? Something along those lines. And what kind of thing, what does it tell us when we see something like that? I'll help you with the easy ones. It tells us that we got a bad connection, doesn't it? We don't know whether it's our Wi-Fi, the underlying infrastructure. It could even be the server at the other end. But we've got a bad connection. Here's what I want to tell you. Your connection with your audience, the bandwidth of that, is the rapport you have with them. Now, let me just show you those 7 power presenting protocols again, because if you arrange them in a certain way, you find that magic word rapport runs through all of them. Because through every single protocol, what you were doing and what you are doing is building rapport with people, asking them what they want and the way they want to receive it. Getting in with people so that when you're on stage, actually, that's just expanding the rapport. You're not growing the rapport. Sorry, you're not establishing the rapport because you already did that. And by the way, if you've never met the people before, because it's a conference like this and you didn't know who was going to show up, all you really need to do is just ask them about your agenda and say, listen, these are the things that I'm planning to cover. Would that be okay? Then you've got some buy-in on that. So the key to rapport is going through those 7 power presenting protocols. So I'm finishing with my key points here. Your communication and presentation skills are the key. The unicorn in the world of engineering is engineering people that have got communication skills too. Very often you'll find that people are prevented from getting those higher up jobs like the CTO because it's their communication skills that aren't there. So I would suggest if you want to accelerate your career, if you want to communicate with potential buyers or people that might fund your company, communication skills are where it's at. So live conferences are very much back, as you can see. So if you want to get out there in front of people, there's a lot of opportunities to do it. But this equally applies to sales scenarios as well. So seize those opportunities, or as I said, even create them for yourself. Let me finish with one last unsolicited presentation idea. If you ever go for a job and they don't ask you for a presentation, I know that in a lot of jobs they do ask for presentations, but if you ever go for a job and they don't ask for one, offer one anyway. Sit there, look them in the face and say, listen, I've been thinking about this opportunity you've got and my skills and abilities and how they might apply to this role, and I've prepared a 5-minute presentation. Would you like to see it? Can you imagine that you're going to stand out now, aren't you? You're going to be head and shoulders above the other people that didn't even think about that. By the way, if you do make that offer, make sure you've got a presentation. Because, they may well ask for it, so just be sure of that one. Okay. that's all I have to say. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been a pleasure going through those 7 power presenting protocols. But, my friends, the real pleasure will come for you, because when you implement these protocols, you'll be far away from FOMO. You'll be far away from FOGMO. You won't be a geek that's missing out, because you'll be in the delightful position of being able to reap the rewards of being a geek that can speak. Thank you.